The way that we do or don't share our stories, good and bad, says a lot about us. I've been reflecting on this deeply since Monday, which was International Holocaust Commemoration Day. Remembrance Day. That day, my social media, maybe yours too, was clogged up with posts about the commemoration. Some good takes, some bad takes. Mostly there were things that really did make me think. Here's one prominent argument I saw amongst my digital friends. People use the Holocaust too much, they said, to teach about the pitfalls of humanity. How we can so easily go astray in these pitfalls, becoming banal in our evil, to borrow some language from Hannah Arendt. Or, to take a concept from Dara Horn, the author of People Love Dead Jews, there is a distinct tendency to generically moralize about the Holocaust. There's a common desire amongst folks to turn this particular calamity into a universal lesson, as though the Shoah's victims didn't come from a particular group, i.e. Jews. It was in that vein, this same line of thought, that Elie Wiesel lamented during the dedication of Yad Vashem about 20 years ago, next month. There's a tendency to say, he said, the Holocaust was about man's inhumanity to man. No, it was about man's inhumanity to Jews. My social media feed this week also had another line of thought. People urging that we share the Shoah more. The people pleading for this, in essence, were suggesting that if Jews could just do a better job of helping others learn more about the Holocaust and helping to moralize it, universalize it, help other folks see themselves in it, that this would benefit the world and overall thereby help Jews too. This is from a lesson on the Holocaust meant for a general audience. The line of thinking goes, sharing the Holocaust in that way would help rebuff anti-Semitism amongst many other things. It could help to inoculate folks against hates the world has now, and those we don't even yet are coming our way. People saying this sort of thing really don't care whether or not non-Jews are entitled to use the Jewish tragedy par excellence to understand themselves. People who say this care about the results. As with most things in life, as with what Aristotle would argue of virtue, the best path is the means between the two extremes. We need balance in managing these competing perspectives. And our Torah portion this week, though, gives us hints toward a path that does precisely that. When the Israelites went to leave Egypt according to the Torah, erev, alah, itam. A great multitude of peoples also went out with them. In the quintessential moment of Jewish liberation, we didn't, according to the Torah, restrict freedom only to ourselves. We didn't say this is a time for Jewish liberation, see y'all later. Instead, we brought others out of Egypt with us. Erev, alah, itam, with them. What does that mean? That means that others were suffering in Egypt too. That means that in that great historical moment of permeable borders, of escape to safety, we didn't go alone. That means, according to some commentators, that we Jews even welcomed Egyptians too, who sought freedom. This is the philosophy of Judaism. We are a particular people, but we exist as part of the universal. The story goes, in a small village nestled between a Jewish shtetl and a non-Jewish neighboring town of farmers and merchants, the two communities lived side by side, but rarely interacted. The Jews stayed amongst themselves, and the non-Jews saw them as outsiders. For years, there was little trust between the two groups. The Jewish community ran their businesses and studied Torah, while their neighbors tilled the land and sold their harvests. Each group believed they had nothing in common with the other. One harsh winter, a terrible fire broke out in the Jewish part of town. The synagogue, the bakery, several homes, all were destroyed. And with little food and no place to pray, the Jewish community feared that they would not survive the cold season. The Jewish leaders gathered to discuss a solution. We cannot rebuild on our own, the rabbi said, but who would help us? And just as they spoke, this is a folktale, of course, so just as they spoke, a knock came at the door. It was a farmer from the neighboring town. He had heard about the fire and brought with him a wagon filled with wood, flour, and blankets. At first, the Jewish leaders were suspicious. Why would you help us? They thought. The farmer smiled and said, many years ago when my wife was ill, a Jewish doctor from this town healed her, and I have never forgot that kindness. Slowly, others from the non-Jewish town began to arrive with supplies, milk, vegetables, even bricks to help in the rebuilding. Though they had never spoken much before, the crisis had brought the two communities together. The Jews invited their neighbors to a Shabbat meal, and for the first time, they shared food, and for the first time, they shared stories, and they shared laughter. As the winter passed and the town rebuilt, the two communities no longer saw each other as strangers. The Jews began buying produce from the farmers, and the farmers sought out Jewish merchants for trade. They realized that despite their many differences, though they had always lived alongside each other, it took hardship to bring them together. And so the story goes, from that day on, whenever there was a festival or a difficult time, the two communities would help one another, proving that sometimes, as I think we all know, alliances are waiting to be found in the places we least expect. Lovely. Of course, all a folktale. But here's the thing. During our real journeys as a Jewish people through the diaspora, we have become quite well practiced at making friends wherever we go. We have a record of partnering at times of crisis and liberation throughout our history. In the American story, the almost cliche example of this has become early Jewish advocacy within the civil rights movement. American Jews supported groups like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and American Jews were instrumental in efforts like the Freedom Riots. Equally famous are Jewish leaders like Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was close to and marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Of course, we don't need to rest on these laurels, because the civil rights movement was hardly the only or the first time when Jews developed such close alliances in our history. Even before that, American Jews played an outsized role in America's labor movement, collaborating with other impoverished immigrant groups, organizing strikes and forming unions, achieving protections for workers from which we all still benefit today, such as the 40-hour work week. Even when not in the diaspora, we Jews have established close relationships with people different from ourselves. Amongst Israel's strongest defenders, for instance, is the Druze community, an Arab offshoot of Islam, which comprise a major ethnic group in Syria, Lebanon, and in Israel. Many Druze now, today, see their destiny as being tied up with the destiny of the Jewish people and with the destiny of the Jewish state. And this has led to such close ties that 6 Syrian Druze villages, even just recently, pushed to become part of Israel after the fall of the Assad regime. If you didn't see that news, this was striking news, and I'll give you a second just to take that in. So, what does all this mean in relation to our Exodus story or Holocaust remembrance? The key in all these stories is that liberation and response to crisis must involve people coming together. When we rose to their help, others needed our Jewish community's help. And at the times when others have assisted us, we needed them too. Still, there are stories, plenty of them, I haven't shared tonight because they are depressing or disappointing or reflect the reality that we don't always get the help that we need. Like when Jews, for instance, needed to be saved during the Shoah, and far too few came to our rescue until much, much too late. What do we do with stories like that? I would tell you, we share them too. We don't give them away. We can't, because they are our history. But to be frank, if we don't share our history, we are shortchanging those many, many generations of Jews who brought us through it. How do we share the history better? We don't hand it over, offering it for others to appropriate and use as they wish. But to share our story without doing that puts an extra onus on us. It is both a blessing and a responsibility that so many people consider our stories, both happy and sad, resonant. We are the ones who must get out there. We must tell our stories. We must make a compelling case of why they matter. And we must make a compelling case of why it matters to others and to us. Like us, our stories are particular, but they exist within the universal. And that is the essence of the line, which won't be on the, it came back, good. That's the essence of the line, the great multitude who went out with the Israelites from our Parsha this week. The Exodus was, of course, an exodus of Israelites. Without us, there would be no Exodus. But we brought others along with us, and without the partners and friends, it would not have been quite as rich. It's our duty to see ourselves as a people with a unique story worth telling. And still, in the midst of that, we must never forget that we are part of a beautiful mixed multitude. Like strands of music intermingling in song, we form an indivisible combination of people and peoples. Our story joining along with that of many, many others, and many, many other stories joining along with our own. When we build friends and allies in that way, we may falter, but hardly can we fail.